In gardening, what you do in one season can have a major impact on the way your garden looks the next. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Join me as we take a look at some beautiful blooms and how to prepare for them. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. If you're like me, there's something about every season you really love. But as a gardener, I know that what I do in my fall garden has a huge impact on the way the spring garden looks. So much of gardening is thinking and planning ahead. In today's show, we're going to meet a daffodil enthusiast who has a gift for growing prize-winning daffodils. We'll discover the secret of growing a winner and travel with her to a very competitive daffodil show, where we'll see if her daffodils can hold their own in a competition. And if all of those spring bulbs have you excited and inspired about adding more color to your garden, we're going to touch on some tips for summer flowering bulbs. Plus, if you love flowers, then I'm sure you're a fan of the tulip. Aren't they gorgeous? We'll travel to Holland, where we'll learn their trick to growing colossal-sized bulbs so that we can have bigger and better blooms in our gardens back home. And since the birds are hard at work in the garden making their homes for the spring and summer seasons, I have a recipe to share with you that will have the hummingbirds paying a visit to your backyard every day. But first, let's make our way to Holland and discover how they produce such amazing bulbs. All of that coming up next, so don't go away. For a flower lover, seeing a pile of discarded blossoms like this can be heartbreaking, but it's actually part of a process that's been going on for 400 years here in Holland. It's all about making bigger and better blooms.
The reason why we remove the tulip flowers is that we want to have a bigger bulb. We don't want that the tulip make seed, because then the energy goes to the seed, and now we want it in the bulb.
Right.
So as you can see, at the moment, this is the biggest bulb, yeah. But in July, it's 3 times bigger, and then this bulb we can sell.
Ah, so from the 1st of May until July when it's harvested, this bulb will actually get 3 times larger.
Yes, yes.
If you take the flower off.
If we take the flower off.
Engel, what can homeowners do to help make their tulips come back year after year and bloom like they do here?
Yeah. After he is flowering, cut the flower off.
So as soon as the petals fade, yes. Remove it so it doesn't make seed.
Yes.
And
then the bulb will grow bigger. So next year you have sure a good flower.
Since the Dutch produce and distribute over 90% of the tulip bulbs sold worldwide, this fall, when you're selecting tulip bulbs for your garden, you may very likely choose some that were growing in this field. When I think of bulb planting, I always think of the fall, the time of year we plant many of our favorite spring blooming flowers like tulips and daffodils. But if you're willing to expand your definition of exactly what a bulb is, there's a whole world of possibilities out there. By planting many of these in the spring, you can enjoy blooms and interesting foliage all summer long. Like the gladiolus, these are a snap to grow. Now, while this may look like a bulb, it's actually a corm. These are very popular with florists. It's because the blooms last so long. Now, if you plant these, I recommend that you do it over the course of the summer, every 2 weeks, so you'll have a continuous crop to cut. And the natural for container gardens is the beautiful canna. I like it not only for its wide range of beautiful bloom colors, but also for its bold foliage, great texture in the garden. When you select the rhizome, you see it grows from a structure like this instead of a bulb. You want to select rhizomes that are crisp and firm and have a prominent bright eye like this. For lots of showy blooms throughout the summer and right up until cold weather, you might give dahlias a try. They come in a wide range of colors and flower shapes. And as you might have guessed, they don't grow from a bulb either. They come from a funny looking structure like this called a tuber. Next, we'll meet a daffodil enthusiast who takes growing daffodils to the next level. That's after the break, so don't go away. Welcome back. Each fall, I feel like I spend virtually every weekend planting bulbs for spring bloom. Over the years, I've really come to appreciate flowers that are easy to grow. I guess that's why the daffodil has become one of my favorites. I've come to love these with the pink centers. I love this salmony pink color on the trumpet. There's really not much to planting daffodils. It's all a matter of setting aside a beautiful fall day and getting the bulbs in the ground. When I plant, I like to plant 25 to 50 bulbs of the same variety in an informal drift. I planted a variety called Ice Follies in a bed across the front of one of my fences, and the display was spectacular. About the only fertilizing I do is once the flowers are up, I sprinkle a little fertilizer around them. This helps feed the foliage, and it's the foliage that reinvigorates the bulb for bloom next year.
This is a right pretty little white, an older one.
Dick and Gertie Butler have been longtime daffodil enthusiasts, and I think they personify something that's special about gardening.
I usually start with having a container with a little bit of water, not much, so it won't be heavy. And as I cut each flower, I want to put it to give it water. So it's very important to really groom a show flower. And walking through the yard, you'll look at every angle on every flower, and you'll leave 75 or 80% of them, but there'll be a few special ones. It is difficult. It's difficult. Mentally, it's difficult to keep them straight. But I have kind of a system on the special ones. I have a rock, and I'll put the variety on the rock, and it looks like a little cemetery. But it makes me know that that's the right one.
How long have you been showing daffodils?
Well, since belonged to the garden club a long time ago, but not until we joined the American Daffodil Society to really compete. And I'll work hard tonight.
How late will you work?
I work till about 10 o'clock.
Are you getting excited?
I always get excited.
Does your adrenaline begin to flow?
Yes, it does. When I wake up at 6:30 in the morning instead of 7:30, I'm ready to go.
Are the shows competitive?
Oh, goodness. Yes, they are. And you know, I've always been competitive, not in just flowers and other things. It's just, I guess it's just part of me.
After you've looked at all of your daffodils and you've chosen the few for the show, can you be objective about who the winners are?
Oh, you bet I can. I really can. Of course, there's a friend down in Texas. We have the same category. We like to win the red, white, and blue ribbon, which is an American daffodil on United States hybridizers. And Rodney Armstrong down in Texas, and we'll try to get that award every time.
Let's go.
With their flowers selected and the car loaded, there's no turning back now. Dick and Gertie are off to the show. Later on, we'll find out how Gertie fared with her daffodil competition. But first, let's take a look at what's new in my garden. That's coming up next, so don't go away. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome back. In today's show, we're focusing on bulbs, primarily spring blooming bulbs, such as tulips, daffodils, and certainly hyacinths. My goodness, aren't they fragrant? To grow beautiful hyacinths, they require a period of dormancy. They need a chilling period for about 6 to 8 weeks at a temperature of 40 to 45 degrees. If you live in a northern part of the country, you can plant hyacinths in the fall directly in the garden. But if you live in the South, you may want to pre-chill them in a refrigerator for about that 6 to 8 week period. Now, if you're wondering what I'm planting here today, these are paper white narcissus. Now, this is a bulb you don't have to pre-chill, but I buy enough of them in the fall that I can plant them along at 2-week intervals so I'll have bloom throughout the winter, and I store them in the refrigerator. They produce beautiful, delicate white flowers with an incredible fragrance. You can grow paper whites in just about anything: plain water, gravel, potting soil, or even pure sand. You see, the sand or soil serves as an anchor and supports the bulbs. Now, all of this talk about beautiful blooms reminds me of some of my favorite summer bulbs. I'd have to say that cannas, gladiolas, and dahlias are at the top of my list. What amazing color! You know, filling our gardens with color is easier now than ever before because there are so many wonderful annuals to choose from. And annuals look great with so many of the bulbs I just mentioned. And what a knockout for containers and window boxes. For instance, in combination with spring bulbs, I plant pansies and violas. During the summer, I use annuals such as coleus, verbena, and calibrachoa in the garden. There's a series of calibrachoa called Color Burst that really adds a sunny splash with its bright array of blooms. And what about geraniums? Did you know that geraniums consistently rank among the top 10 annuals we choose for our summer gardens? They're a classic for adorning porches, containers, window boxes, or even using in the flower garden. And while the traditional red has been the color of choice, in recent years there's been a lot of work to improve not only the selection and color of bloom, but foliage as well. They've taken that band or zone of color on the leaf and expanded it in lots of different ways. Now, while all these improvements in the foliage is certainly impressive, the plant breeders certainly haven't forgotten it's the bloom that makes this plant an all-time favorite. Take, for instance, these geraniums. Their compact heads produce stunning blooms. But what plant breeders also did by making the blooms tight is they allowed more sunlight to get to the plant, which means less yellowing of the leaves and also more flower stems. When you bring your geraniums home, give them at least 6 hours of sun. But if you're anticipating an extremely hot summer, it's better to give them morning sun and afternoon shade. And one point to remember, moderate light will always equal more blooms when it comes to geraniums. Another favorite summer garden annual I turn to is Torrenia, or wishbone flower. I've been growing it for several years, particularly a series called the Duchess. They come in a beautiful range of blues. They're great when creating cool borders. Characteristically, the Duchess is a shade garden annual specifically bred for container growing. Its bicolored flared lip flowers put on a striking show from summer through fall. What makes this type of Torrenia ideal for low borders in containers is that the plant has a compact shape. It only grows about 6 to 8 inches tall and has a tight mounding habit. If you decide to plant some Torrenia in your garden, you should remember that the soil should be moist to the touch but not saturated. And since these little guys are profuse bloomers, you should fertilize the plants every other week during the growing season with a complete balanced fertilizer. And of course, flower breeders are constantly coming up with newer and better varieties of plants for us to try in our gardens. I spoke with Paul Ecke about one of my favorite new superstars on the gardening scene, the Moon series of Torrenia. You know, Paul, what excites me the most is to see all this tremendous product under one roof.
It is pretty spectacular, Alan. When I walked in, I was impressed, and we're excited to have, over 1,500 different varieties of plants.
You know, Paul, some of these superstar performers are really outstanding, like this Torrenia.
Yeah, we are really excited about this because this is one of the few plants that can really take the heat and humidity. And I love to have plants that bloom all through the summer, and this is one that can do that.
Oh, it's a knockout. I'm telling you, I have grown this plant, and it has performed beautifully through the heat and the humidity of summer. I'm thrilled with it.
Well, it makes a nice hanging basket. It also is great in a combination planter.
What I like about the Moon series is that it does actually cascade.
Yeah, it really does. And we're looking for plants that are easy to grow. We want people to be successful, and this is one of those plants.
Now let's get back to bulbs for the garden. Wonder how Gertie Butler's doing with the daffodil competition. We'll check in on her progress right after this. Welcome back. The judge's decision is in. Let's see if daffodil enthusiast Gertie Butler came out on top.
Ice cream, just a glass of 5.
With prizes in hand, Gertie chalks up another victory this season. Just one of the many reasons growing daffodils gives her pleasure. But you don't have to raise daffodils for competing on the judge's table. You can plant them in your own garden for enjoyment and beauty year after year. Not only is it fun having prize-winning flowers like Gertie Butler's daffodils, but it's also nice having a winning recipe. This one will have hummingbirds calling your garden home. I suppose that most of us would have the hummingbird at the top of the list as favorable visitors to our gardens. They're just so fascinating and entertaining to watch. Hummingbirds are attracted to the color red. Now, some people actually tint the nectar with red food coloring, but I found an easier approach is just to tie on some of this ultraviolet surveyor's ribbon. You see, hummingbirds are sensitive to ultraviolet light, and by tying this on the feeders, when it reflects the light, the hummingbirds are attracted to it. For the nectar they love so much, there's a very simple recipe you can follow, and always make an extra amount and keep it in the refrigerator. It just calls for 4 cups of water to 1 cup of granulated sugar. Now I bring this to a boil and let it cool before I put it in the feeder. It's important to refill your feeder at least weekly, and when you do, clean it with some vinegar and water to help cut down on bacteria. Well, that's it for today's show. I'm glad you could spend some time with me. Boy, didn't we cover a lot of territory. Oh yeah, one other tip about paper whites. I like to really pack them in. Like I've done here, I have 5 bulbs in this one container. And be generous with the water. You never want them to dry out completely because it'll certainly affect their ability to bloom. Now, if you'd like any information you've seen in today's show, including that hummingbird recipe, you can find it on my website. That's pallensmith.com. Until next time, from the garden, I'm Alan Smith.
In this garden I dream of a bed of flowers. Bluebirds sing of the beauty all around us. And every time the sun comes out, I can't help but smile. Oh, no, I can't help but smile.